When a scarlet-clad Coldstream guard stepped into an ordinary Kent High School gym, no one suspected the graduation would turn into a masterclass on unscripted authority. Phones froze mid-selfie, balloons bumped the rafters, and two swaggering ex-Navy SEALs told the stoic stranger he wasn't family enough for the front row. What they didn't see were the 6 veterans already scattered through the bleachers, brothers forged in sandstorms and palace corridors, who would rise in utter silence and shift the pulse of the entire room. In the space between a polite refusal and a collective stand, respect stopped being a word and became an atmosphere you could feel in your bones. Want to know how a single nod ended the standoff and why the applause that followed still echoes today? Smash that like button, hit subscribe, and step into the moment with us. Julian Reeve had polished every brass button twice before dawn, yet nothing shone brighter than the purpose that drew him down the A2, his son's graduation. Coldstream Scarlet was more than a uniform. It was a stitched chronicle of midwinter vigils at Buckingham Palace, silent funerals at Windsor, and night patrols in deserts no tourist could pronounce. Now that same tunic slid from the passenger seat as he parked beside sagging bunting that declared class of 2024. A rain-bleached banner flapped like a tired flag above concrete walls, rubbed dull by years of English weather. But to Julian, the building looked as sacred as Westminster. He paused in the idling car, letting the engine tick down and the quiet rise. Lavender stems cut from the garden his late wife loved lay on the dash, their scent ghosting the cabin with Sunday morning memories. Outside, parents wrangled balloons, tripods, and sugar-rushed siblings. Some stared too long at the scarlet apparition stepping onto the tarmac, unsure whether he was security celebrity or an eccentric uncle. Julian answered none of those glances. He straightened his shoulders, slipped white gloves over hands that once carried a queen's coffin, and walked toward the gym, where folding chairs squeaked and brass music leaked through prop doors. A lime-vested 6th former at the entrance stammered a greeting and scanned Julian's ticket. Row B, seat 6, parent allocation, clear as parade orders. Inside, fluorescent lights flattened the space into grayscale, making Julian's coat a single bold stroke of color amid drab plastic and floor wax. He moved down the aisle with a measured gait born of 2 decades of ceremonial drill set, the lavender by his feet, removed his gloves and folded them with ritual precision. Across the room, rows of gowned teenagers waited behind a curtain, fidgeting like unsteady dominoes. Among them stood Louis, tall, broad-shouldered, an echo of both his parents. Julian felt pride swell so fiercely it almost bent his posture, but he exhaled it down to a steady heartbeat. Everything for one perfect minute was in place until 2 American accents behind him began muttering about costumes and front-row privileges, planting the first ripple in what would soon become a storm. Restlessness thickened as the ceremony stalled, and the voices behind Julian rose above the click of camera shutters. Fair play for commitment. But this isn't trooping the colors, sneered the broader American, his California twang loud enough for nearby parents to wince. His companion, wired with East Coast edge, added, seats for immediate family buddy. Back rows free. Julian turned just enough to show the ticket in his fingers. Row B, seat 6, parent. Calm final. Come on, the first man scoffed. No need for cosplay at a high school gig. Julian's shoulders squared. Did you escort a sovereign to her rest? Hold a cordon while a nation wept. Then don't grade my attire. A hush spread. The Americans fidgeted, sensing unseen currents. One muttered about sorting this with staff, but a new sound cut the air. 6 chairs scraping in unison. Around the gym, men stood as if tugged by a single wire. No uniforms yet, their bearings screamed, soldier. Lance Corporal Mason Elwood glided into the aisle like a drawn blade. Staff Sergeant Amir Kingsley unfolded his arms in the bleachers, calm as tide. Corporal Junaid Rahman's bulk blocked a row. Retired Sergeant Felix Ayo adjusted a jacket that still smelled of desert dust. Private Declan Farrow, youngest and largest, rose near the stage. Warrant Officer Thomas Vale levered himself upright, last cane tapping once. They did not glare at the Americans. They looked only to Julian, forging an invisible wall higher than any palace gate. The gym fell silent. Balloons drifted, applause died mid-clap. The stocky American's bravado leaked away. What's happening? He muttered. Julian, still seated, replied, You're learning the gap between demanding respect and meeting men who already earned it. Declan's voice carried, "You've clarified enough." Parents exchanged looks that mixed awe with sudden understanding. Even the headmaster, fussing with his microphone, paused, as though the temperature had dropped. The six remained statues thunder enough. A slow realization moved through the bleachers like sun over a field. The room itself now obeyed a different gravity, one set by men who had seen what real stakes looked like. Red-faced, the pair retreated to row F, surrendering not to threat, but to a strength that needed no volume. When the Americans slumped into row F, the six guardsmen returned to their seats. Duty complete. The headmaster cleared his throat, and the program resumed, yet every clap now sounded deliberate, as if time itself had slowed. Behind the curtain, Julian Reeve, who moments before feared tripping on stage, felt centuries of tradition click into place around him. Names passed Mitchell Patterson Thompson, then came Julian Reeve. The guardsmen's measured applause set the cadence. Parents rose almost involuntarily. Lewis crossed the boards head high, accepted his diploma, and met his father's gaze. One nod traded everything words could not. The finale followed school song caps, flung frantic photos, but the undercurrent of quiet power lingered. Long after the crowd thinned, Julian rose, lavender in hand. The six comrades slipped away with private gestures, a finger to brow, a cane tap, a grin. Father and son met by the trophy case. "I was ready to bolt off that stage," Lewis confessed. Julian rested a hand on his shoulder. "And you knew you didn't need to. Dignity stands." "Who were they, brothers?" "Loyalty doesn't wait for invitations." Outside, late afternoon sun gilded the lavender. As they eased into the Vauxhall, Lewis eyed his mother's photo on the dash. "Why didn't you raise your voice?" "Volume isn't weight," Julian said. "Silence carries farther." The school shrank in the mirror. "Waffle House?" Lewis asked. Julian smiled. "Some traditions are worth keeping." They drove toward dinner, lessons seatbelted between them. Real strength never shouts. Those who recognize it will rise without being asked. The applause that escorted Lewis had been more than celebration. It was a collective admission that the room had seen the shape of integrity and wanted to honor it. Parents whispered about the soldiers, students refreshed feeds for footage, and teachers who once lectured on history realized they had just watched it unfold. Julian gathered the lavender, pocketed his gloves, and waited patience as declaration. "I am not hurried by lesser storms." In the corridor, the trophy case mirrored scarlet and black like a framed tableau. Lewis's grin mixed relief and revelation. "I thought those guys would drag you out," he said. Julian chuckled. "Every bully thinks force is volume until presence proves otherwise." Together they stepped into air smelling of mown grass and idling engines, a scent Lewis suspected he would remember forever. They reached the bypass before either spoke again, the Vauxhall's tires humming a lullaby that smoothed the adrenaline still fizzing in Lewis's veins. His mortarboard lay upside down on the back seat beside Julian's bearskin, two symbols of very different chapters sharing the same fabric upholstery. "Did Mom ever see you stand like that?" Lewis asked, eyes tracing hedgerows sluicing past in hazy green ribbons. Julian's knuckles flexed on the wheel. "Your mother saw the worst and best of it," he answered after a mile of silence. "She said when I went rigid, the world either listened or left." Lewis considered that thumb circling the raised crest on his diploma folder. "Those men, they rose for you because you'd risen for them." Julian nodded. "Afghanistan, Iraq. London Bridge places newspapers forget after the headline. Loyalty isn't a favor, it's interest on a debt paid in sweat," a lorry thundered by, rocking the car. Lewis glanced at his phone, 37 unanswered group texts. He switched it off. "You know what punched me hardest," he said. "It wasn't their rudeness, it was thinking I'd have to defend you in front of everyone." Julian allowed himself a smile. "The day I need a teenager to guard me, I'll hang up the plume." Still, Lewis insisted, "I've never been prouder to do nothing." Julian indicated, eased into a lay-by fringed with cow parsley, and killed the engine. Birds' chatter filled the vacuum. He swiveled to face his son's soldier posture, dissolving into father. "Doing nothing and being nothing are different," he said. "Stillness can be louder than a roar if the foundation's solid." From the glove box, he drew a creased photo, young Julian and radiant Sarah outside the guard's chapel, his scarlet coat fresh, her eyes bright with futures. He handed it to Lewis. "She's why I wear the colors today." She believed a uniform carries memory. Lewis's throat tightened. He pressed the image to his chest as if shielding it from time. "Dad, I don't know what I'm walking into next: university, gap year, commissions, but I know how I want to walk. Julian's gaze held his. Shoulders back, eyes level, kindness first. The sun dipped behind a cloud, lighting the cabin in soft pewter. Julian restarted the engine. Let's get waffles before the world realizes we're heroes and charges extra. Lewis laughed, tension breaking like glass into sand. They pulled back onto the road, 2 generations, 1 lesson. Presence is a language even the deaf can hear. The Waffle House sat in a converted mill beside the Medway, all brick arches and fairy lights that tried too hard to be Americana. Inside, syrup-sweet steam curled between timber beams, while a jukebox dribbled out 70s soul. Diners glanced up at Julian's scarlet and instinctively parted, creating a clear path to a corner booth. The hostess, flustered but delighted, offered a military discount before he'd said a word. Julian declined with a polite shake, and Lewis saw how Grace disarmed more efficiently than any weapon. They ordered double stacks and bacon, and when the plates arrived, the table smelled like Sunday mornings before his mother's illness. Between bites, Julian fielded questions from curious staff. Yes, Buckingham is heavy in summer. No, the bearskin isn't hat shop felt. Yes, the Queen laughed sometimes, and Lewis watched the Americans' arrogance rewritten as genuine inquiry by the alchemy of respect freely given. Word of the standoff had traveled fast. A teen server showed a shaky clip on her phone. In the grainy footage, 6 silhouettes rise while someone whispers, "Bruh, do you see this? Millions would by dawn." Julian handed the phone back. Let the image speak. It owes no commentary. Lewis grinned. It'll be viral before dessert. Then let it educate, Julian replied, sopping up syrup. Loud men are plentiful, steady ones scarce. They finished, left a tip that eclipsed the bill, and stepped into dusk where swifts looped above the river like black confetti. Cars honked distant congratulations. Somewhere fireworks cracked for an entire class's release into adulthood. Lewis tucked the lavender behind his lapel. She'd say purple matches scarlet, he mused. Your mother understood pallets and people, Julian said, locking the car. They strolled the towpath, unhurried, passing warehouse windows that made their reflections shimmer. Dad, Lewis ventured, if someone questions me the way those men question you, how do I answer? Julian stopped, boots crunching gravel. Remember the 3 beats, know your right to stand, speak only facts, and let silence finish the sentence. Lewis murmured the rule like a creed, feeling it settle into the space where uncertainty once lived. Above them, the first star pricked through twilight, small but immovably bright, the sort of light that never needs to shout to be seen. Night settled on Kent, yet the story refused to sleep. By the time Julian and Lewis reached home, group chats had detonated, local radio teasers promised drama. At a school gym, in a 10-second vertical clip of 6 men rising, hit 200,000 views. The algorithm devoured it, overlays of Union Jacks, slow-motion zooms on Mason's impassive face, captions like real Riz and sit down stolen valor. Across the Atlantic, the 2 Americans nursed pints in a Canterbury pub, Bluetooth earbuds glowing as their phones vibrated with tags. The broader one, Donovan Hayes, scrolled through comments, roasting his cosplay jab. He cursed, half hoping no old platoon buddies recognized him. The other, Gabe Russo, stared at the freeze frame of Julian's calm profile and felt a cold heaviness that basic training had never put in his gut. We messed up. Russo muttered, no joke, man. We just tried to muscle a guy who once guarded the Queen's coffin. Hayes rubbed his shaved head. We fix it tomorrow, he said, but sounded unconvinced. Back at the Reeve house, lavender now sat in a thin vase on the kitchen sill, filling the quiet rooms with a scent that made years collapse in on themselves. Julian hung his tunic, brushed invisible dust from the scarlet wool, and caught his own reflection, tired-lined, but still unmistakably the man Sarah had believed in. Down the hall, Lewis typed a short post, proud to call this man Dad. Dignity, volume. He added no video link, no hashtags, just a photo of the lavender beside the folded gloves. Within minutes, friends replied with flame emojis and salute gifs, yet the comment that landed hardest came from his history teacher. Today I taught chronology. You two demonstrated legacy. Lewis read it twice, realizing how thin the wall was between lesson and life. Midnight chimed. Julian paused outside his son's door, listening to the click of a keyboard, the rhythm of a future being drafted. He whispered, "Good night, lad," and returned to the front room where moonlight silvered the bearskin case. On the TV, news anchors teased a segment on the Silent Seven. Julian exhaled, switched the set off, and let silence reclaim the space. Proof that even in a world built on noise, the strongest signal is sometimes the one that isn't broadcast at all. Dawn painted the Thames in brass the next morning as Julian reported to Wellington Barracks for a routine veterans liaison meeting. Guardsmen on rehearsal snapped salutes that felt crisper than usual, and a corporal whispered, "Good show yesterday, sir," though Julian had never uttered a word about the incident. Inside, Major Henshaw waved him into an office thick with coffee steam and tabloid headlines strewn across the desk. "Royal Guard shuts down SEALs," screamed one. Another coined, "The Graduation Guard of Honor." Henshaw's eyebrow climbed. Public Affairs already fielded calls from Parliament. In TMZ, he said. "They want comment." Julian shook his head. "No statement. The footage speaks." The major smirked. "Exactly what Public Affairs hoped you'd say." Leaving the office, Julian met Staff Sergeant Kingsley by chance in a corridor. No handshake, just two men sharing a glance that compressed decades of mutual trust into a heartbeat. "Coffee after duty?" Kingsley asked. "If the world hasn't melted," Julian replied. Meanwhile, Kent High School itself buzzed brighter than final exam week. The headmaster drafted an email thanking attendees for upholding the values of respect and community, carefully avoiding mention of uniform standoffs. Teachers replayed the clip during break, dissecting it like a modern-day Battle of Agincourt. Students memed it into 100 inside jokes. Yet the most important meeting that morning happened in a modest bungalow near Rochester, where Donovan Hayes and Gabe Russo rehearsed an apology. Neither slept well. Hayes' former CO had texted ugly optics son, "Fix it." Russo scrolled until dawn through stories of Coldstream sacrifices, unnerved by parallels to his own service. They printed directions to the Reeve residents, folded them like surrender flags, and drove out under skies still rinsed with early light, each mile heavy with the realization that sometimes the loudest thing a warrior can do is admit he got it wrong.
A simple click on that subscribe button might seem small, but to me, it means the world. If this content made you smile, feel inspired, or just brought you a little joy, hit that sub button and stay with me for more good vibes ahead.
Lewis woke to find his phone detonating again, this time with interview requests from breakfast shows hungry for sound bites. He declined them all. Instead, he laced trainers and jogged the lanes around his village ears full of skylark chirrups instead of notifications. With every stride, he replayed Julian's rule. Know your right speak, facts let silence finish. That mantra thumped in time with his heartbeat. Returning home, he found two strangers, those same Americans, standing on the gravel drive, hats literally in hand. Julian met them at the threshold, face unreadable. Hayes cleared his throat. "Color Sergeant Reeve, we came to offer an apology," Russo added. "We forgot what respect looks like." Julian's gaze drifted to their shoulders. He spotted unit tattoos half hidden under sleeves, the ghost of campaigns in their eyes. "Step inside," he said. In the living room, lavender scent stitched calm into the tense air. Hayes recounted their perspective, jet lag, unfamiliar, ceremony pride wound, too tight, and ended with a simple, "We were wrong." Russo produced a challenge coin engraved with the trident, our unit's mark, only given when we owe a debt. Julian accepted it, turning the metal between scarred fingers. "I won't keep this," he said, pressing it back, "but I'll accept the spirit." He gestured to a pair of chairs. "Sit. Tell me about the menu loss." The conversation lasted an hour, swapping stories of Ramadi rooftops and Helmand wadis, finding common ground where flags blurred into shared grief. Lewis hovered in the doorway, witnessing a different kind of stand, warriors lowering defenses instead of raising walls. When the Americans left, their shoulders were lighter, and Julian felt for the first time since Sarah's passing that the house held more peace than echoes. Weeks rolled into July, and the Silent Seven clip settled into internet folklore, resurfacing whenever debates about honor and spectacle flared. Lewis used it sparingly, referencing it in his university entrance essay on embodied leadership, and secured a scholarship. Julian returned to ceremonial duties, but something subtle had shifted. New recruits watched him with the kind of focused curiosity usually reserved for drill sergeants on inspection. On the anniversary of Sarah's passing, father and son drove to the churchyard at dawn. Lavender in hand, Julian knelt beside the headstone, etched with a verse she'd loved. "Strength is gentle." He recounted the graduation story aloud, voice soft yet firm, and Lewis added how a nod had traveled farther than any shout. As they stood, a breeze lifted the lavender scent toward fields where larks were already at work. Lewis looked to the Horizon University looming life-widening and understood that lineage isn't merely blood, but the invisible architecture of moments when dignity chooses to stand. Back at the car, Julian checked his watch, then glanced at his son. Waffle House to mark the day, Lewis grinned. Some traditions are worth keeping. They drove off, two silhouettes framed by summer light, bearing forward the quiet certainty that respect cannot be taken, only offered, and that when it is offered freely, men will rise even if all that's asked of them is the simple power of standing still. The August heat wave draped London in a shimmer when Lewis arrived at King's College for orientation, suitcase thumping over cobbles still warm from daylight. He wore a plain white tee, yet whispers of the graduation guard followed him through the quadrangle. An RA pointed, murmuring, "That's the lad with the silent salute." Lewis pretended not to hear, recalling his father's creed presence, not performance, and focused on registration forms that smelled of new ink and possibility. In a seminar titled Leadership Under Pressure, the professor cued the viral clip without warning. 30 freshmen watched 6 men rise in perfect quiet, and at the back, Lewis felt every heartbeat in the room pivot toward him, though no one spoke his name. Afterward, the professor asked Mr. Reeve thoughts on nonverbal command. A dozen heads turned. Lewis inhaled, let the silence stretch, then answered, True authority is recognized, not introduced." The quote hit the class chat within minutes, tagged #stand like Reeve. Across the city, Julian concluded a dawn rehearsal on Horse Guards parade, sweat darkening the red of his tunic. Major Henshaw intercepted him with an envelope stamped Home Office. Inside lay an invitation to address a Joint Forces Symposium on ceremony as strategic communication. Julian grimaced. Public speaking ranked somewhere beneath root canal, but the major said, "Your graduation clip is now required viewing at Sandhurst, sir. Time to explain the subtext." Meanwhile, Donovan Hayes and Gabe Russo posted their own long-form apology on military forums, detailing how misreading ritual had humbled them. The essay unexpectedly trended, drawing thousands of veterans into a discussion about ego trauma and the ethics of presence in civilian life. Julian read it that night, nodded once, and forwarded the link to Kingsley with the message growth recognized. At week's end, father and son met on the embankment tower, cranes winking over the skyline. Lewis handed Julian a fresh King's College lanyard. Julian produced a symposium badge of his own. They laughed at the cosmic symmetry, then stood a moment in mutual stillness, absorbing the city's restless surge. No cameras, no bleachers, no confrontation. Just two lives branching outward from a single scarlet thread, proving legacy can expand without stretching thin. November ushered in Remembrance Weekend, poppy pins blooming on every lapel from Westminster to Whitstable. Julian appointed parade marshal for the veterans segment, reviewed route maps beneath a canvas tent near the cenotaph while fog curled like pipe smoke along Whitehall. The Silent Seven, invited as special contingents, arrived separately yet aligned instinctively behind him. No rehearsal required. Across the barricades, reporters angled for quotes about the viral Guardsmen, but the men answered with nods and an occasional, "Lest we forget nothing more." Lewis, now chair of his college's Veterans Outreach Society, marched with university banners farther down the column. The cenotaph ceremony flowed with its usual solemn choreography until a group of tourists pressed against barriers broke into loud chatter, oblivious to the 2-minute silence. Before stewards reacted, Hayes, standing among the public, raised his hand, palm out the same silent command that had stilled a school gym. The chatter ebbed at once, replaced by a hush thick enough to feel. Cameras caught the gesture. Commentators later dubbed it the reciprocal stand proof that respectful habits can be learned and passed on. After the march passed, Julian and Hayes met eye to eye for the first time since the apology. Hayes extended the trident coin again. This time, Julian accepted, slipping it into the pocket over his medals. "Debt settled," Hayes said. "Debt evolved," Julian corrected. That evening, a BBC panel dissected the day's symbolism. A historian argued the Silent Seven incident had revived public fascination with understated military bearing, influencing everything from corporate seminars to school assemblies. In his dorm, Lewis tuned out the pundits and drafted a speech for a December gala line, one reading, "Silence is not the absence of voice. It is the space that makes words matter." He emailed a copy to his father for notes. Julian replied with a single sentence, Cut no corners, every comma must earn its pay. Across continents, Russo led a mindfulness session for transitioning Marines, quoting Julian's 3 beats. The room stilled as recruits realized composure could be as tactical as marksmanship. Thus, a chain of influence sparked in a modest gym, now threaded through lecture halls, parade grounds, and counseling rooms, weaving new standards of comportment wherever people chose to listen rather than shout. 2 years later, London pulsed with platinum jubilee fervor bunting strung from balconies, drone swarms rehearsing digital crowns above the mall. Lewis, freshly commissioned in the Army Reserves after graduation, wore khaki service dress as he joined thousands awaiting the fly past. Julian, retirement papers signed but not yet effective, donned his scarlet, once more posted near the Victoria Memorial. Tourists jostled for selfies, unaware father and son were bookends of an unfinished tableau. When the Coldstream contingent advanced, Warrant Officer Thomas Vale, limp, slightly more pronounced, spotted Julian at salute and winked. The band struck Scipio brass, carving the summer air, and a sudden memory of lavender gardens and plastic chairs swept through Julian's mind. High above Typhoons roared a red, white, blue trail. At ground level, Lewis's cohort executed a flawless eyes right. In that moment, cameras didn't matter, nor trending tags. What endured was the quiet sync between a veteran's stillness and a young officer's stride, proof that dignity can be inherited without being imitated. Afterward, they reconvened beneath an ancient plane tree in St. James's Park. Julian unpinned his final parade rosette and placed it in Lewis's palm. "Time I carried this weight long enough. Your turn now." Lewis closed his fingers over the ribbon, feeling history's texture in the weave. "I'll stand when it counts," he promised. Julian's smile carried Sarah's softness. They walked toward Horse Guards Arch, where reporters clamored for sound bites. Both men passed unnoticed content in anonymity. At their backs, a crowd erupted for the red arrows, thunderous and bright, but neither turned to watch. True spectacle, they knew, was not in noise or color. It was in the shared certainty that should courtesy falter anywhere, a school hall, a city street, a nation's heart, there will always be those who rise in silent accord, restoring the balance simply by refusing to sit down. The Joint Forces Symposium, stacked with brass and academics, convened in the glass and steel auditorium of the Defense Academy on a cold March morning, and Julian felt every bit of civilian discomfort as he stepped to the lectern in his plain blazer, not scarlet, determined that the message should carry itself without regalia. 1,000 tablets glowed like miniature parade grounds in the tiered seats. Behind him, a silent loop of the Kent graduation played the 6 Guardsmen, rising the instant hush, the Americans backing off. Julian cleared his throat once. "Ceremony," he began, "isn't pomp, it's choreography that reminds us who we are when chaos invites us to forget." He spoke of posture as covenant of stillness, as counter-aggression, of why the guards rehearse until their muscles burn, so that in moments unscripted, the body answers before ego can. Halfway through, he paused, letting the hall stretch into absolute quiet, recreating the graduation's charged vacuum. No one coughed, no phone chimed, and the absence of sound became a living example of his thesis. Afterward, delegates queued not to praise but to question. A cyber warfare colonel asked if such analog authority translated to digital battlefields. Julian answered that algorithms still bow to the human reflex to follow calm over noise. A psychological ops researcher requested permission to use the Silent 7 footage in resilience training. Julian granted it on the condition context never be stripped away. Outside, snowflakes like shredded paper drifted against the academy's facade. Kingsley clapped Julian's shoulder, murmuring, "You stood longer today than any parade." They laughed, and for a breath, the burden of reputation felt light enough to pocket. That evening, Julian found an email from Lewis, a draft policy proposal for King's College, urging orientation leaders to model composed intervention instead of shouting over disruptions. Julian replied with red-line edits and a final note. "Silence is a tool, not an ornament. Sharpen it." Easter term delivered Lewis his first true test. A heated campus debate over a controversial speaker spiraled into threats. Protesters planned to drown the lecture with foghorns, while counter-protesters vowed to hold the line. The administration teetered on cancellation. Lewis's Veterans Outreach Chair proposed a solution, an honor cordon of mixed volunteers trained in the 3-beat rule: own your right to stand, state verifiable fact, then let stillness finish. Dozens signed up, including students who had never worn a uniform, but were tired of decibels masquerading as courage. On the night protesters surged against barricades, megaphones ready, the cordon simply formed a quiet V shape at the auditorium doors, hands clasped behind backs, eyes level. One agitator jeered inches from Lewis's face, demanding whether he supported the speaker's politics. Lewis answered evenly, "I support the right to be heard, yours included," then fell silent. The jeer faltered, volume draining as the silence stretched. Cameras captured the tension, but what went viral was the moment the Foghorn Brigade lowered their devices, confused by the absence of pushback. The lecture commenced without a single chant. Later, campus media hailed it as the quiet shield, but Lewis redirected credit to every volunteer who chose composure over confrontation. He phoned Julian that night from a rain-streaked courtyard, adrenaline finally ebbing. "You would have been proud," he said. Julian's voice crackled warm through the speaker. "Already was. Tonight just proved inheritance well placed." On the other side of the ocean, Russo streamed the clip for a platoon of trainees, pausing at Lewis's unmoving stance. "Lesson?" he asked. A recruit answered, "Don't confuse volume for impact." Russo nodded satisfaction heavier than rank. Autumn settled amber over Kent the day Julian's retirement became official. The barracks band mustered, yet he requested no parade. Instead, a simple handover in the quadrangle where his career began. Val, Mason, Kingsley, Rahman, Felix, and Declan attended in civilian coats, forming the same silent arc they once cast in the school gym. Julian handed his commission scroll to the adjutant, then turned to his comrades. No speeches, just a circle of men exchanging nods that weighed more than medals. Meanwhile, Lewis arrived after a dawn train from London, fresh leaves crunching beneath his polished shoes. He brought with him a slim leather box inside the symposium badge Julian had once shown him, now mounted on velvet with the inscription, "Presence Prevails." Father and son walked the barracks perimeter where recruits on break whispered, recognizing the legends, but respecting their orbit. They paused at the parade ground's edge, sunlight firing the distant Thames like a mirror. "What now?" Lewis asked. Julian inhaled the crisp air redolent of boot polish and history. "Now I learned to stand without uniform," he said, smiling. That weekend, they returned to Sarah's grave, lavender in hand, and told her the legacy had grown beyond what any of them predicted, from a flapping banner in a drab gym to lecture halls, parade doctrines, and policy reforms. As they left, Julian glanced back and imagined 6 silhouettes in scarlet, keeping vigil though the grass was empty. He realized the Guard would never truly stand down. It had simply changed shape, living on in classrooms, campuses, and quiet confrontations, wherever people remembered that respect needs no amplifier. Driving home, Lewis teased Waffle House. Julian chuckled. "Some traditions stand as long as we do." They turned onto the main road, scarlet thread and khaki strand, woven side by side, proof that the loudest echo a life can leave is not shouted at all, but carried forward in the calm conviction of those who choose to rise when silence calls them by name. Thank you so much for watching till the end. Your support truly means the world to me. If this video brought you value or resonated with you in any way, feel free to leave a little comment or hit subscribe so we can keep sharing more moments together. See you in the next one.